Hello, it's Donna Marie, and welcome to the Kwanzaa edition of the Best Life of Wellbeing podcast. Today is day 2 of Kwanzaa. Kujichagulia is the principal from the Nguzo Saba. Before we move on, please subscribe to our channel, hit that notification bell, like our content, and share your comments. We want to hear from you. In this intimate conversation, let's talk about defining ourselves, naming ourselves, creating for, and speaking for ourselves. Today's intimate conversation is with Jokotifa Alaye. Jokotifa has been a death professional for over 25 years. Jokotifa is a mourning doula, building a community of empowered grievers. She is also the author of Fire Under the Night Sky, which is a guide to letting go. Excellent, excellent guide, highly recommended. Jokotifa is a wife, a mom, and she has a goal of helping us to live well and die better. Welcome, Jokotifa.
You did your research. Thank you. You got it all.
This was a brief bio. I want to hear from you. Tell me a bit about who you are from your lips to my ears. Share, please.
Absolutely. And so we'll start with the big thing. Who am I? Grew up in the Bay Area, California, and attended mortuary college at the San Francisco College of Mortuary Science. One of the last couple of classes before that location shut down, and then it moved to what is now American River College in the Sacramento area. I've worked in death care since I was 18 years old. So I graduated high school. What June you graduate? I went immediately into mortuary college in like that October. And I've done nothing else since that time. And I just turned 44. So that's whatever that math is.
Your whole adult life.
My whole adult life has been being a death care professional. All in mortuaries, do an apprenticeship. I am an embalmer. I can operate a crematory. I've worked in cemeteries. I've basically done everything you could possibly do in a funeral home and cemetery. Mourning Space is my passion project. Mourning Space is the result of COVID. Mourning Space is the result of introspection and saying, if I died today, would I be happy with what I've done? And I've done a lot. Like I am grateful for the way I've been able to serve people in my career. But there was a piece missing, and it was insistent that I figure it out. And so that's how Mourning Space was born. Separately, as a part of that, and as you had said, like grief, you find grief in a lot of places. And one of the places that I found grief was in my relationship, or lack thereof, to my African ancestry. And that's really been a journey over my life. My mom is Italian. My dad is African American. And I have a very clear lineage in my mom's family, but I didn't have that and didn't recognize it. I just was like, well, I don't know where I'm from there. I don't know any of the people there, and I'm just here. And eventually that felt like that I was not honoring all of those people that I came from. And so I looked into African traditional religions. I found one that is working for me. And in the course of practicing that, was given this name. And so Jokotifa, that actually is showing up now on Instagram every day. Like it's that, it's the ashe that I got from that, from this practice that I do daily, that's helping me show up authentically, and helping to repair what I think is decades of apathy to our ancestry. Not that it's not recognized in some way, but not leaning into it. And so that was something missing in my life. I had a lot of grief around that. And this was a way to, I guess, make personal reparations, even if you want to go that far. But that's what it feels like.
Yeah, because in many ways you weren't honoring your full self, because you weren't honoring that part of your ancestry. Can we talk a bit about the religion? You mentioned the religion, but what is the religion?
Yeah, it's Isheshe, Ifa. So I am in an Ile, which would be, the group, and it's called the School of Orisha Studies. That's the one I found. And I'm a breadcrumb follower. So everything I've done in my life has sort of been like a breadcrumb showed up and I followed it and I went to the next one. And it just keeps happening. And I like to say that my life has turned out pretty well, following those breadcrumbs. And so I think there's something to that. And there was a breadcrumb that led me to some of the Orisha, not knowing what Orisha was, not knowing anything, like nothing about it as a 40-something-year-old. One popped into my awareness. I was like, who is this? I should know more. And that was the first breadcrumb that sort of led me to the School of Orisha Studies, which I like because it's very practical and very studious. So it's like you show up to class and you learn. And I'm a Virgo, like I like structure, I like rules, and it's very like learn this first, learn this, learn this, learn this. And it's been a huge blessing in my life. And now the balance is integrating that practice with, again, that whole self. So how do I now, practicing this ATR, how then do I integrate and bring in the Italians into that too, and like be everything? And that's sort of where I am right now.
Well, I certainly can say I love seeing Jokotifa show up each day on Instagram. I love your messaging. And I'm really amazed because your message, it's not just you showing up to have something to say. Everything I hear you say is very meaningful. It's very inspirational. It's very practical. And I really appreciate your presence and your content when I see you on Instagram, and which is one of the reasons why I wanted to have this interview today. Have you gone through an initiation?
Initiation's not a focus necessarily of the School of Orisha Studies. If you get there, you get there. If you don't, you don't. The ceremony I went through, the Eshefa, and then Ile Ori, which is another one, are what get you in touch with yourself and Ifa, Orumila, who would sort of guide you back to yourself. That's kind of, there's yourself, and then this entity, this deity that would guide you to be the best self that you can be. And that's another reason why I love this practice, is because it's about being you authentically and fully, and serving others in the way that you're meant to serve, and bringing about what we call the good condition. So it's really about making a difference, making the world better. And my little tagline, right, is building a community of empowered grievers who intend to save the world by living well and dying better. And I'm serious about that save the world part. And I think you're doing that work too. And from hearing your story, you're out there to make this process better. And in doing that, you heal people more fully than when they're shutting out this piece of their life. And I think that's what we all need is healing all sorts of ways.
Mourning doula. I'm a whole life death doula, and I have to explain that to people all the time. What is a mourning doula?
Thank you for asking. I attended the University of Vermont end of life doula program. And what I'll find with a lot of end of life doulas, death doulas, and maybe you see the same in your work, it's such a new/old, which means new for me, meaning not regulated practice, that doulas define what it is that they do. So I'm calling myself a mourning doula as someone who is being present and illuminating how endings are transformational, right? How we might walk with each other through endings. And so that's why I'm calling myself a mourning doula, although it's very much informed by what I know about death care and the work I've been doing in death care.
That is awesome. And then that explains also why you have created the hashtag Empowered Grievers, and also created the community of empowered grievers. It all aligns with who you are as a mourning doula in creating that space.
That empowered grievers, I love it. So anyone wants to use that hashtag, and that's the Peloton hashtag I made up too. So like if people ride, they can put hashtags on their bike and ride with other people who are in that community. So that exists if you have a Peloton.
Well, I am interested in knowing all about what you're doing.
When I think about what Mourning Space could be, I really do I want it to be an actual space, like a physical space, but also an online space where people can get the grief support that they need. And the maybe even adult friendships that they need to get them through that, because that's another thing I'm seeing so often are adults saying, I don't have friends, or how do people even make friends, or I'm a parent and I work, and like, who has time for friends, right? And so it's a real part of how we're living, right? But I don't want anyone to feel like they don't have a friend. I don't want anyone to feel like they don't have someone they can go to with this heavy stuff, because it's just, if you bottle it up, it will come out in ways that are unhealthy. And that's one of the reasons I think the world needs healing. Like, the world will not be the great place we need it to be if we're all stuffing down our emotions, and then they're coming out in ways that are not beneficial to us, right? And if we don't listen to one another, and if we don't take turns filling up each other's cups, right? So I envision a community where people come when they need someone to hear them, to a safe space where they can say what they want to say what they need to say, without fear of judgment, without fear that to be able to bring their grief somewhere and know that people are going to take it. Because there's so much anxiety around, people don't want to hear it, people don't want to be bothered with what they have, life to live, they don't have time for me, like, I will be strong and I will deal with it. No. So I want to create a space where people can do that, but also be a space where people are like, I don't need anything today, I'm willing to take it from you. Like, I'm a place where you can come give me, and I will take I want your burden. Like, you can give it.
I just went on last Monday to an award ceremony. Songs of Hope was the name of it, at the Kennedy Center, and Dr. Vivek Murthy, he's the U.S. Surgeon General, has written a report on loneliness and isolation.
I have it like right up on, it's a tab open on my screen here. Yep.
I've read most of it, but I haven't gotten through all 82 of the pages. But it is so powerful, because our world is changing and people are becoming more isolated and more lonely. And it really is so important to get people together. One of the things I do in Best Life of Wellbeing is really focus on helping women 45 and over. When I learned about elder orphans, so, elder orphans, people like me who get old, and you haven't focused on those social and community relationships. And then you get old without thinking about your future. You just living in the moment and doing what you got to do to survive. And then you find yourself all by yourself. And one of the 5 regrets of the dying is, I wish I had spent more time with my friends. Right. And so it is, the work you're doing is so, so very important. When you get a certain age, it is a whole lot more difficult to develop those relationships for whatever reason. It could be because we are not comfortable stepping outside of our comfort zone, because we are not as mobile. It could be a host of reasons. And so what you're doing is really great work. And I think at the beginning you said you wanted to change the world. This is world changing work that you're doing with Empower Grievers in Mourning Space. So I applaud you and I support you in any way that I can. And again, one of the reasons why I wanted to have this intimate conversation with you today.
Well, thank you. And I'm very impressed with what you're doing. So please keep doing it.
Thank you. I love your book, Fire Under the Night Sky, The Guide to Letting Go. It's a easy read. It's a workbook. I see the picture also from the workbook in the background on your wall. And this book, when I read it, anybody can utilize this. And it's not just focused on grief from loss and death. We go through grief in so many spaces and phases of our life. As I mentioned to you before I started the recording, my father died in 2014. And when he died, my mom became a widow. My daughter went off to grad school and had never lived on her own as an adult. And I became an empty nester for the first time in my life. And I can imagine all of us, the 3 women, going through our own, not just grief from losing my dad, but grief, my daughter, there's a grief that you experience when you got to move from being taken care of and not having as much responsibility to being an adult and living on your own. And she moved to New York City. So like I sit in New York sometimes and I'm just amazed by the sensory overload of it all. Like there's so much happening. And then me, for the first time, I was a teen parent. So I had never in my adult life lived alone. So it was my first time actually living alone. And honestly, when raising my kids, I thought I was going to be excited about it. But there was an extreme period of grief, learning how to adjust to this new life. And so you wrote this book, and I'll let you share why you decided to write this book and the intention here with this book. So I guess that's my question.
So again, COVID time, I'm trying to figure out what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And I'm seeing all of the grief that the pandemic brought up for us. Again, not just with the loss of life, which was extensive, but with the loss of the idea of the way we thought the world worked. Most of us were not around to see anything, that disrupted our life so much that the way we viewed the world changed. And we are changed people because of this, right? And the way, the sort of underlying safety that maybe even we just as Americans thought we had, we know that that's not true. We're on shakier ground than we ever thought.
Yes.
And I knew that we were already bad at grieving deaths of people. And so we're going to be even worse at grieving little, quote unquote, little losses that don't appear to loom so large, but are compacted. And the losses that our kids are going to experience, so many of the kids didn't get the school or even just the social part if they weren't at school, there's just so much there that we are going to carry with us generationally. So I was like, I really want to take what I've learned about the death and dying of a person and use it to apply that knowledge to grief in general. And so I took a course, I took a death doula course, and then I took a grief support specialist course as well. And that book is the result of my final project. And so I had thought that I was going to do something that would be for use in funeral homes, since that's just so much of my life and what I know. But it ended up, I kept being internally nagged to create something that was a different kind of funeral. And so I took my knowledge of how do I write a funeral, and I applied that to how would I write a funeral for a part of myself that I was ready to let go of. And so that's really what that book is about. And people will naturally, when people know who I am and my background, they naturally purchase the book thinking it will help them through the loss of a person. And I enjoy experiences like this where I can say, no, this one's about you, and it's about something that's not serving you anymore. And so in my instance, it was about my eating habits. And it came about because I was sitting with my therapist, because I believe people should have therapists. And we were talking about how no one talks about the grief that happens when you stop something that's not good for you, but that you love, right? And so I have come over the course of my whole lifetime, I came to fill emotional voids with food, right? And that's very common. Like, this is not, I'm not unique in this. Oh, you got a feeling? What can I put in my mouth so I don't have to think about this? So it was about like, oh, what if I had a funeral for the part of myself that doesn't want to eat that way anymore, right? And so if I'm going to have a funeral for a part of myself, I have to understand it better. And so that's where the life cycle comes in. So I just started from the backwards. All right, my end result is I want a funeral. How do I get there? Okay, so we have to define what it is that we're losing. And then, so in my example, let's say I said food, but then I had to ask myself, is it really food? Because no, food is nourishment. Food is family. Food is a key to good health. So it's not food, it's the behaviors around food. Okay. So when did those behaviors show up for me? Like, why did I start to come to rely on that? And I identified a time as a child where, like, how eating made me feel in that moment. And then just where I've gotten good feelings from either binge eating or, just like I'm on a stressful phone call. I eat the food. It doesn't feel so stressful anymore, right? Just I want to recognize that habit brought me feelings that felt good, yes. Right? So you list those out. But then you determine, okay, well, what are my whys? Why do I not want to do that anymore? What is so big? What are the whys so big that I'm willing to let those good things go? But also, where can I get those good feelings somewhere else? So you can also get that from like a drink of water or a breath of fresh air or a little walk, or there are healthy ways you can get that same like dopamine hit, right? Yes. Aren't so destructive to yourself, right? So it's really just honoring why you became that person, why it's okay to feel loss around that, because you came to rely on it. It did make you feel good. What do you have so you're not empty, right? So when you take that away, you're not left with nothing. Like, you have something to rely on, even though it would be practice to rely on it. And then have a funeral for it. So what have you learned? And in the workbook, I take you through all the sections. You make your notes. And at the end, I wrote a funeral service for you. And you plug in what you learned in the spaces. So you can have your own funeral if you want to do something else. But if you don't want to think about it, like I don't want to think about stuff, you just plug in your answers and read it and do something symbolic to close the cycle. So whether that's, burning a representation of that thing, or writing it and ripping it up, or, whatever it is that you would kind of signal that loss. And then you thank yourself also for doing that work, right? So I want people to feel good knowing that they've done something hard, but that there's value in doing something hard. And that's a part of the process too, is like, look at the new person I am now and the work that I had to do. And that's something to be proud of. And then at the very end, I make you write yourself a thank you note. Because at the end of a funeral, right, families thank the people for coming, for showing up for them. And so I want you to intentionally thank yourself for showing up for yourself. And then I give you a few resources so you can make that thing long lasting, make it top of mind.
Well, I just want you to know I'm going to use this book when I'm having conversations with clients and in any type of educational training I offer, because, this guide to letting go, it could be worry. It could getting to the roots of why we worry. Why are we, that dopamine hit, addicted to arguing? It could be anything that isn't serving us, and getting to the root. I love that when you thought about the food and your emotional eating, mm-hmm. and you thought about letting it go. It's like, well, I can't let go of food. What are the good aspects of food? Maybe you don't get to the root, but you learn that you're able to substitute. You're able to get that dopamine hit by doing some other things, and you feel even better because it isn't destructive. It isn't something that you're going to feel guilty about or whatever it is. So I love the book. And I just want to read, although you've already said this, I just want to read the back of the book. And it says, during a therapy session, and it says Karen Carnetz, I realized she was an emotional eater, and it made her sad to think about losing that behavior. Though you've already said this, once she recognized there was grief involved, she knew she needed an opportunity to mourn. As a lifelong dieter, facing her grief was the one thing she had never tried. An expert in creating funeral ceremonies, Karen set about to create a similar ritual to mourn with intention the loss of her emotional crutch. I love this book so much. So congratulations. I think it's really so important for us to create language around what we're feeling. A lot of times we feel it, we don't share it. And if we do share it, we share it when we're angry, or we share what we're feeling in a way that really doesn't represent, like you said, people. And I listened to a podcast where you were interviewed, And I can't remember the gentleman's name, but one gentleman he mentioned who said, I didn't want a funeral. And he asked him to share what he really meant. And
Mhm.
why don't you want a funeral? And it's for some of what we've already discussed, because it in some ways doesn't really represent who I am. And so it's not that you don't want a funeral, you want something different. And let's talk about what that something different is. And creating our voice around grief is really so healing, not just for us, but then we can have conversations with our children, with our spouses, with other family members to help them as well to process their grief by using language that actually describes what I'm feeling for real. And really the emotion and not necessarily the feeling. What would
Right.
you like to leave what the with the audience? And I'll just share my question would have been, grief can be a tool for growth and transformation. Those are your words, right?
Yes.
Um, and I was going to ask how your book kind of explains the how, but your last words, what would you like the audience to know before we close this interview?
I think that is a great way to close. There are some things that we are forced into experiencing and we don't want to. And death is one of those things. Endings can be one of those things where we don't have any control necessarily of when they happen or what happens or what ends. And because it's so uncomfortable and we've not grown up with it. Even a lot of us have not grown up with experiencing that and navigating it as a family. We stuff it down, right? And so what I'm hoping to do is shine a light into anyone who has stuffed it down and make them feel safe to let it have air, right? And when you do that, you learn things about yourself. You become someone transformed. You become someone with this sacred knowledge that then you can share with others. You become someone who's alchemized your feelings and made something out of it, because you can make things out of it. And so I point to, all of the beautiful music that was created because of a loss, all of the works of literature that were created because there was a loss. If you look around, everything, like beautiful things, are built on loss. And so I just want people to know that that is a possibility for you too. Like your loss can do something for yourself or for others that changes the world for the better. And so that is what I mean when I say growth and transformation. It's just, yeah, it when you've been there, when you've done it. And so I want people to know that's a possibility.
Yes, that is awesome. Thank you so much. Will you also share with the audience where they can find you on all social media platforms? Uh, if you want to close about Empowered Grievers and tell people how to connect with you there and what's to come, please share that with the audience.
Well, I will just say I am, of course, on Instagram. That's kind of my primary method of communicating my message, and that's at Mourning Space, MOURNING. And then I have my website, mourningspace.com. And so those are the two places that really you can read the things that I share on occasion on my blog, on the way you can stay informed as I build my community of empowered grievers, as you can share little tips that I have about death of a person, place, or thing. So not just around the death of people. Mourning Space is a place where we talk about the grief that happens in any loss and how you use it as a tool for growth and transformation. So there you go.
Thank you so much for your time today. I have enjoyed this conversation immensely. I hope to meet you in person one day. And I hope that maybe even in the future, there's opportunity to partner. So again, thank you. Keep doing the great work that you're doing. And I want to end with one quote. I think I got it from your book. It's highlighted in my notes and it kind of aligns with everything we've discussed today. It says, no matter how far a river flows, it never forgets its source.
That is a Yoruba proverb.
Yes, and I love that so much. And it is so it so much aligns with the conversation that we've had today.
Absolutely.
So